we've made two videos acknowledging the existence of this player before. One of them was pitting him against Matthew Savoie, and the other one was talking about his teammate with the Don Mills AAA Flyers, Brent Clark. But Shane Wright is giving us reasons to talk about him today because his performance with the Kingston Frontenacs after being selected first overall in the OHL Entry Draft, after being granted exceptional status, and after starting the season off as a 15-year-old and just recently turning 16 about a month ago, is having a better draft -2 year than Connor McDavid did. And that is something that I am saying with 100% confidence, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, not even with a few outliers, not just taking a look at one or two stats and saying, oh, look, he's better than McDavid. His profile for this year is at and above the same level as Connor McDavid's was when Connor McDavid was the same age. Now, Shane Wright is an exceptional status player who was recently granted exceptional status earlier in 2019, meaning that he was able to start in the OHL back in September. He was 15 back then, and he didn't turn 16 until January of this year, which means that he was actually given the go-ahead to play in the OHL in his 15-year-old year. At the moment, Shane Wright is leading the Kingston Frontenacs in points by quite a bit. He's got 55 points in 47 games played. The next player, Zaid Wisdom, has 48 points in 51 games played. Then Jordan Frasca drops off to 36 points in 47 games played. The Kingston Frontenacs are one of the worst teams in the OHL this year, and their numbers aren't looking all too great. Despite that, though, Shane Wright has been the limelight of this year for Kingston, with his crazy high points per game for a guy who is only now 16 years old. His points per game is 1.17. And if we go to the OHL record books and we take a look at other players who have played when they were U16, Shane Wright's points per game is higher than Connor McDavid's, and it's by quite a bit. In fact, he is just before John Tavares in terms of Tavares' points per game, but it should be noted that John Tavares was joining an Oshawa team that was pretty good. They had really good players on their team already. Tavares was not even first on his team in points that year. He was 22 behind Peter Simiskalis. Shane Wright is dominating his own team in his own right, and he is the undisputed best player there. Connor McDavid was in a similar situation as Shane Wright is in today with the Erie Otters back in 2012-13. Connor McDavid had 66 points in 63 games. His points per game was a little bit lower than what Shane Wright's is today. But McDavid was also on a bad Erie Otters team, and he was also playing with a Connor Brown who was pretty good, but a lot of people would say that Connor Brown was better because McDavid was there. McDavid, Brown, and Lombardo formed the top line over there for Erie, and they were all pretty okay together. But Connor McDavid is Connor McDavid, and everybody knows that he was really good. He was a 15, 16-year-old in this season as well. But just to illustrate how good Shane Wright has been doing over Connor McDavid, aside from just the points per game, let's take a look at involvement scores, which is a stat that takes the total amount of goals a team has scored and divides the amount of points a player has into that. Shane Wright has 55 points, and the Frontenacs have 166 goals. Shane Wright has 55 divided by 166, 33% involvement in all of Kingston's offense this year. Connor McDavid had 66 points in a season where the Otters scored 206 goals. His involvement rate was at 32%. So even on the team variables, just taking a look at the teams that they're on and how good they're playing on those teams, Shane Wright is having a better involvement season than Connor McDavid is. His points per game overall is better. His team statistically around him is worse than Connor McDavid's team was, and Wright is the undisputed best player in Kingston. Connor McDavid had to share the title of being really good with Connor Brown and Lombardo. Tavares is in a different boat entirely because he wasn't the best player on his team, and they had a lot of really good players on the Generals that year. So Shane Wright is legitimately the best 15, 16-year-old player the OHL has ever seen. And that is nuts. The numbers are saying that he's better than McDavid, and that is something that I didn't expect to be saying a year ago. Because a year ago, we all knew about the three-headed monster at the top of the 2022 NHL Entry Draft: Savoie, Wright, and Lambert. I didn't think one of those would be as good, if not better, than McDavid on paper in the OHL. Speaking about those other two guys, Brad Lambert recently made his Liga debut, and that was chronicled beautifully by Face Off with Fahrenholtz, so give a shout out to him. Check out his video about Brad Lambert's debut in the Liga. But Lambert is already here in the Finnish Liga in a pro league playing with men as a 16-year-old, and he's already broken a few records here. Savoie, on the other hand, isn't really doing all too great in the WHL. He started off things with a lot of injuries. He hasn't really been the healthiest, so I have no doubt that Savoie is going to become better as the years go on for him. And still, we're 2 years removed from the draft, and Shane Wright is already doing Shane Wright things that it's just crazy to see the upward development of these players over here. And the way Shane Wright controls the OHL game is so spectacular. Every trait that he displayed with the Don Mills Flyers a year ago, he still has, and he's still displaying it to such a great level like he did last year. Shane Wright, to me, has so many good qualities that he definitely does have such a high NHL ceiling, and I don't even want to start labeling what that could be, but the fact that he is already doing as good, and in some categories better than McDavid, kind of paints that picture already. Shane Wright's best ability to me is his ability to read the game, and to play things one step before they happen. It's kind of a similar trait as to what Gretzky was able to do. Now, I'm not going to say that Wright's going to be the next Gretzky, no. But I'm just taking a look at what Gretzky was able to do, where people say he could read the game 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. Gretzky had a mind for seeing how the game was going to play out before it played out that way, and it was why he was able to control the game like he did. Shane Wright has that same ability. Maybe not to the extent that Gretzky did, but he has that ability to read the game into the future, depict what's going to happen before it happens, and strike from there. Add to that, the puck skills, the shot, the overall playmaking ability that Shane Wright possesses, and his awareness to know where other people are on the ice. It is so good. His skating is so good. His profile as a hockey player is so good. The guy is already 6 foot 183 pounds at 16. Jack Hughes, when he was drafted at 18, was like 5'10", 170 pounds. So it's absolutely astounding to look at the body of work that Wright has been able to do, putting him in the same conversation as guys like Tavares and McDavid, and I guess Spezza, because he's on this list too, but Spezza was really, really good too, don't get me wrong. But it's crazy to me that we can look at this draft in 2022 and say that Shane Wright might not even go first, because Savoie and Lambert have such equally intrinsically good draft stocks too, that it will be a three-headed monster battle for first overall. But if I had to label it today, I would say 100% that Shane Wright has the lead, and he's taken a stranglehold on that lead. But obviously, because we're 2 years out, we still have a lot of room for Savoie and Lambert to grow and overtake that lead. Boy, oh boy, I love talking about prospects. This is absolutely nuts. Ah, man, just the involvement scores and the points per game and all that stuff. It's so crazy how good Wright is that I don't even know if I've articulated it clearly enough as to how good he has been. I will say that probably the only thing that Wright does need to improve on is his shooting, because he does have 31 goals at the moment, but he only has 157 shots. He's at a really high 19.75 shooting percentage, and that obviously is going to go down as the guy proceeds throughout his career in the OHL. So if I could just make an argument that he should probably shoot a little bit more and develop his shot that way, then I would. But other than that, it's hard to find a flaw in a player who was granted exceptional status, who is in the same conversation as McDavid, and who is totally leading an OHL team by himself at recently turned 16 years of age. So yeah, Shane Wright's pretty good, isn't he? Hope you enjoyed this video. Social Life Trust 99. And bye.